So it's 5:30 a.m. This is the downside of being a digital nomad. So the original plan was actually to have a schedule where I woke up at 4:30. So waking up at 5:30, 5:45, because maybe we press the snooze button, shouldn't actually be that big of a deal. However, since we didn't have internet at our place and me getting sick, it just messed everything up. So now what we're doing is we're walking out during one of the worst times to try and get a taxi, because it's about 6:45 now, which is when everyone else is trying to go to work. But we'll see if we can find a taxi. If not, we'll do a Grab. Something we've noticed is taxis are pretty much 50 to 40% of the price of what you'd get with a Grab. So we're hoping we can get a taxi, because that's 40 pesos versus 110. And then finally time to have a meeting with my business partner. And this would be the first full workday. We did not find a taxi. It is just absolute chaos out there. So we get to pay double the price and have a Grab take us over. Finished up meeting with my business partner for a couple of hours, Jesse, and I feel a lot more relaxed, because it's been a couple of weeks through sickness and not having internet at our place that we actually were able to connect. And it was a good thing we did too, because it turns out we were both working on solving the same problem, which is we are working on a process of taking our YouTube videos and turning them into blog posts. He was working on it one way, I was working on it a different way, so luckily we were able to get together and stop each other before we both spent more hours than we needed to doing the exact same thing. But that just kind of goes back to the importance of always being in constant communication with whoever you're working with, and then of course having a common place where you put up the projects that you're working on, which is something we're both getting used to, because we're both very used to just being told what to do. This is just kind of like what it is like being an employee. You're told your inputs, and then you're told what you have to do, and so you have your own task list, you have your own way of managing files, and we're still working on how to make sure that we don't double up on stuff. But I think we're doing a pretty good job between Asana and Google Drive. So now that I know what I should be working on, it's time to get some work done. Now, while the rest of my day was productive, by the time I got home, because I'm staying here pretty late to get work done, because there's no Wi-Fi where I'm actually sleeping, I just did not have the energy to finish off this vlog. And the next day was sucked up by heading over to this camera shop, because I picked out a background and a ring light for the recording that I'm going to be doing in about a week. So we've found a solution to the internet and internet problems so that I can actually start recording content videos again. And part of that was getting this giant gray background essentially for the set, so that I can set up I have a lot more flexibility in terms of where I can set up to record videos. And so what I wanted to do now is share with you the completion of the work that I had been talking about in terms of putting together a process for having someone transform a blog post into a YouTube video. Now, in the past, you've probably seen some sort of diagram like this from me. This is just one piece of the bigger picture of putting together a blog post, but today I wanted to focus in on writing, and specifically how I figure out who's going to do what and when it's going to get done. So not necessarily how to put together a process, but the first step, of course, would be figuring out the top part of this diagram. The rough draft, then the proofreading, then the graphics or editing, and then thumbnail. And that's just kind of the big deliverables of what goes into a decent blog post. Well, you probably need someone to write it, and then there's some editing and graphics, and you probably need a thumbnail to, share it across social media and whatnot. So what I wanted to do is show you how I come up with the team members. So typically the big deliverables equal one team member. Typically, sometimes obviously a team member can do multiple things, but in this case we have a writer, we have a proofreader, and then we have the graphic designer. And what I do is inputs and outputs, because it can be very hard to tell someone else what you want them to do. And so the very first step I think of is, if I want someone to write a rough draft of a blog post, what is everything I need to give them in order for them to do that? You kind of think of like each person, each task as a factory. You want to put information in and then you want to get whatever you want out. So you really have to think about, what do I need to give someone, or what do I have to put in order to get the result that I'm looking for from my team member or freelancer. And I really harp on this point because of the comments I get from other people who've not been successful with freelancing. And most of the freelancers I've talked to have been very appreciative with the input side of things and how much they're given. And so if you are having struggling and feeling like, man, I can't find anybody, really take a look at the inputs, because as an entrepreneur, you should be looking at yourself when things are going wrong, not necessarily who you've hired, although sometimes it is the person that you hire. And so then you can see here with the proofreader, what do they need? Well, they need to be able to see the original video, and then they need the rough draft. And of course, the graphic designer just needs a couple of things in order to start making the thumbnail and or graphics for the post. Now, something we're going to do, because most of our graphics are in PowerPoint and Google Slides, we're going to try and have the writer actually make the graphics as well, because they're going to be the best positioned person to figure out how to graphically explain the things that they're writing. Now, once you've figured out your inputs and your outputs and who exactly the number of people that you need, then the next step is figuring out when things are going to get done. Because as linear as this process up here might look, we can actually double up and have multiple people working on multiple things at once. And so this is a little more nebulous, so I'm just going to show you this graph that I quickly put together as opposed to the scribbles in my notebook. But I essentially look at the inputs and outputs and I go, okay, how quickly in the process can I get something started? So in this particular instance, if you're having someone do writing for you, well, really, once you have the rough draft, a lot of other people can start working, but you really need that rough draft to start. But you don't have to have a rough draft in order for someone to have a thumbnail. You just need to know the keyword and you need to know what the post is going to be about. And so actually you can have someone writing the rough draft and creating the thumbnail at the same time. We don't have to wait for the rough draft to be complete for the thumbnails and actually some of the graphics, but I'm not gonna get into that because that's a little too convoluted. And then once we have the rough draft, the proofreader can go through, the graphic designer can go through and make the graphics, and then the SEO expert, we're actually gonna have the SEO person be someone outside of this process, because we really wanna make sure that the content is focused on delivering on the user intent, and then have SEO come in on top of that as opposed to writing an SEO blog post first. I'm sure you've read a blog post where you go, I don't understand why they worded it that way. Like they seemed like squeeze that word into that sentence. I don't want people having that experience with the on-page SEO that we're going to be doing for our post. So once we have the rough draft, it can be proofread, the graphics can be made, and the SEO person can start working on all of that on-page SEO stuff at the same time. So we're dramatically going to cut down on the time it takes to actually get a post out, because once we have that rough draft, 3 people are going to be working on it at the same time. Now, obviously you need to make sure that there's no overlap, but with Google Docs, it's pretty freaking easy to have multiple people working at the same time. And then once all of that is complete, BG4, actually it should say 5 here, is the part of the process where someone takes over and actually posts it to the blog and promotes it across social media or whatever other campaigns that we are doing. And so that is our process. I shouldn't say our process. Multiple people are involved in creating this for essentially turning a YouTube video into a blog post. But really that inputs and outputs kind of methodology has dramatically reduced the amount of time it's taken me to figure out what exactly I need to give someone else in order to be successful. Because as soon as I can distill it down to a list, I think it's just a lot easier for everyone to go, okay, I need this, 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 and that. All right, I have everything. I'm gonna go do my job, right? We don't have to tell them how to write it or start micromanaging them, because they have everything they need to do the job they were hired to do. So thank you so much for watching and bearing with me with the video quality, the shaky cam, and just the spanning multiple days of these vlogs. This really has been way more stressful than or disruptive to work than I ever could have imagined. You can plan everything, and I'd say 95% of what we planned and what we made sure to take care of worked out. It was just that one little hiccup with the internet, and you know, sometimes people aren't truthful with how things actually are. So until the next, keep building the business you love.